Oh, thank you. How's everyone today?
Great, thank you.
Great.
Excellent. Uh, Loved your speech, and I think one of the things that touched me the most is just how your approach, right? So the approach is everything, and understanding that there's going to be grace that's given. Not saying to necessarily earn it, but there's always grace, and you keep that in mind. My question was in your upbringing, and you had mentors. Normally, with mentors, there's going to come accountability. Do you remember a time that it kind of stood out where one of your mentors made you accountable for something, and you had to say, "Okay, I got it," and I appreciate you making me accountable because I didn't see it that way, or I could have went, in a different direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And that happened to me daily. There are any number of different things. I grew up playing sports, primarily basketball, and I was also a martial artist. And so my sensei, as well as the other instructors in the dojo, I studied three different types of martial arts, were always holding me accountable, and my coaches, whether it was basketball or track. And so if I made a mistake on the floor, or if I made a mistake with a particular kata, whether intentional or not, there was always a consequence. But the consequence was always given with love, and it was instructional. It was not a punishment, but it was a teaching opportunity. And by holding me accountable, it made me a better person. They never enabled me and they never made excuses for me. If I was injured or if there was something that I couldn't do because I didn't have the capacity to do it, they had enough empathy and self-awareness to say, okay, you're not going to run today, or you're not going to fight today, or you're not going to play, or we're going to sub you out because they had enough intuition and they spent enough time getting to know me and didn't treat me just like another player, that they could see when I needed some grace, and they could see when I needed accountability, and then they could address or adjust that level of grace or consequence or accountability based on what was going on with me. Because again, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the foster care system, but it's a very traumatic experience, and
Yeah.
not just from the fact that you're torn from your family, and in my case, I had no contact with any of my biological family. And so there's the trauma of that, but also the trauma of being abandoned, them not looking for me or even wanting me. And so that was something that I always struggled with. And there are plenty of times, whether I was on the field or in the arena or the rink or on the court, where something would trigger me and I would just vanish, in terms of my my awareness. I would just disappear, and they would catch it and they would say, okay, you can't do that because you're going to get hurt, or you're going to hurt someone else, or we're going to take a loss, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they sometimes they say you need to snap out of it, and sometimes and hold me accountable. Sometimes they would say, okay, you need to run some laps, or you need to do some push-ups, or or you need to do these assignments. But yes, absolutely, Marquise, accountability and consequences help establish those boundaries and help keep me organized, because I was all over the place emotionally and physically. I was constantly running. I was always on the run, and I put run in air quotes.
Thank you.
Excellent. Go ahead, Brother Marquise. I'm sorry.
No, I was just, thanking them for giving that response, so I can identify with, some of those things. But I think that the main thing is um, the awareness of the person that you're dealing with, understanding, and then you're understanding that when they explain it, it's an opportunity for growth.
Yeah,
So it allows you to take it in and be like, okay, I don't do that, but it's also a learning opportunity. Like you said, it allows you to grow and become the man that you are today.
yeah. one of the things that I really appreciated too from them, which I've tried to adopt myself, is that they recognized that they weren't perfect and they knew that they didn't have all the answers. And so their humility was also something that really moved me because we would often learn together rather than, it being a, you know, teacher-student relationship, even though that's how I always saw it. Now, as an adult, I see that it was more symbiotic and it was more of a partnership.
Excellent. And I had a question, Judge Wilson. It's kind of a long question. I hope it makes sense. So
Sure.
you attribute your life choices to the mentors you had. And this
Hmm.
may seem like a redundant question with an obvious answer, but if you had encountered mentors who taught you to sell drugs, join gangs, commit crimes, do you think you would have turned out to be a completely different person than you are now? I want to add with that, having the spirit that you have, having the soul that was born inside your body, the mind, the heart that you have, do you think you still would have turned to a life of crime because you had those mentors? Or do you think you would have said, no, I don't want this type of life. I want something different. I want something better.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I did have those. So I did have mentors who taught me all of those things that you just mentioned. But in the breadth of them teaching that to me, like firearms, for instance, is a perfect example. I learned all about firearms when I was an infant. And one of the reasons why I learned and why I was taught about firearms was so that I could respect firearms and then make an informed decision about whether or not I would carry or whether or not I wouldn't. What I would do if I found myself in a situation where I was confronted, um, based on what I knew a firearm could do, which firearms, calibers, et cetera, et cetera. And so the same was true with gangs, drugs, and some of the other things that you just mentioned. I had mentors who taught me, who showed me, who said, hey, Ron, this is how you do this. Hey, Ron, this is how we're doing that. Hey, I want you to see this so that I could have a choice and I could make an informed decision. They didn't choose for me, they gave me the option. And I think I chose wisely 9 times out of 10, but there were times when I didn't choose the right path, where I made decisions that weren't in my best interest or hurt other people. But I always knew it was my choice. I never felt that society or my community or anything else was the reason why I was making these decisions and I was in the situation I was in. I knew that I always had an option. And the only way that I could truly, for me, understand that I had an option from their perspective was knowing both sides. And then they were proud of me. Some of them weren't. Some of them were like, man, we need you. We want you to do this, you're that, and the other. But most of them were like, good for you. I'm glad that you chose not to do this. I'm glad you didn't choose this lifestyle. You're better than that. And many of them would even say, I want you to have the choices that I didn't have when
Mm.
I grew up. And so yeah, I had those, but that's a great question. And in my faith, I grew up as a Christian, and I can't stress the role that God and my faith also played in the choices that I made growing up and the choices that I make now. And so I think the combination of the two, and I've always seen, I love the stories of the Bible, and I was always been attracted to Moses. The story of Moses is one that's always resonated with me, and and I find a lot of similarities in his story and in my story, and so that also played a huge part in in my journey is my faith.
Beautiful. Thank you. And thank you. God bless you for immensely, for eternally, for making the right decisions and all the countless, countless lives that you have blessed and benefited just by
Yeah.
making the right choices. So thank you. I'm so,
Thank you.
so
Yeah.
grateful for that. And
Thank
Chief
you.
Mela, I see your hand up. The floor is yours.
Yeah, and I concur with Tracy, but I have one question, Ron. I know you worked in more the municipal court. You worked more so in the civil. Okay. And I know
Criminal.
you talked about which I agree with, restoring the victim, but restoring the perpetrator also. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, how does that play into, because that's what we're, also doing to do with our courts, but how does that play into those who have do the violent crimes? You see what I'm saying?
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's, and which is, I personally do not understand at all, but
Yeah.
if you shed some light on that.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. So, to clarify, I probably processed as many criminal cases as I
Oh,
did traffic.
okay.
Most of the cases that I processed were domestic violence
Yeah.
cases. And so but there were misdemeanors. A lot of DUIs, but I'd say the DVs were number one looking back at it. And when we talk about violence, we have to bifurcate it. It's like race or ethnicity or language or even religion. All of it can't fit into one box.
Right.
One word cannot describe the plethora of differences that exist when we talk about violence. I was a sexual assault investigator for about 10 years.